I see the futility, that there's nothing really that I can do to get there, because I see how my attempts are just circles, spinning in circles, and my mind spins in circles. And it seems like I can't stop it. I don't think there's methods to get there, because I've seen those run through. I worked with somebody else who had methods. So I feel like I'm just left with this no man's land of, I'm not fully embedded in being into the story, but I'm not into this place where I don't think I'm a separate person. I believe I'm separate. That's what's going on. And so it's like I just wait for one day when whatever this horror is that I feel goes away. But that's all I have right now, is that. Yeah. And so, in a sense, I watch this program, I listen to you. I guess it comforts me to some degree. But otherwise, day by day just passes by in sort of a no man's land, and I'm running out of options. I'm running out of places to go, and I see people with lots of places to go. Oh, go meditate. Oh, do this, do that. I don't know, you know?
So yeah, I mean, it's no man's land. It's a great question. So yeah, I mean, the spiritual search, hopefully, eventually leads to exhaustion. Hopefully, eventually, you become exhausted with the whole thing. You start to see through it and the futility of it. I mean, I was a very, very intense spiritual seeker, and really intense. I shut myself away for a year, 2 years, and that's all I did from morning to night. Really, was just seek and seek and seek, read spiritual books and meditate, and really the whole thing ended in despair. I mean, it's funny because people, because I write books and do talks, or whatever, people think that I must have succeeded, right? Jeff must have succeeded because he did all the spiritual seeking and then he awakened. Well, I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth. I've never said anything of the sort. Never. The seeking ultimately must end in failure, because it's the mind looking for something it cannot have. It's the mind looking for something it cannot have. And so where I ended up years ago was just, it's very similar to Frank's story, just this place. Well, nothing really meant anything anymore. I completely saw through the futility of seeking, and yet I still felt separate. And I had these stories as well about this. I was still waiting for something to happen. I was still waiting for like the final events, or the final falling away, or the final shift, or the energetic shift, or whatever. It was like I'd kind of given up doing anything, because what I'd seen was that anything I do is going to fuel the sense of being a separate person. There's going to be a me there doing something to get free. At the same time, by that point I couldn't give up, because to me it was either I couldn't go back to the way it was. So really, I always say this. People laugh when I say I failed. My spiritual seeking failed. I failed to awaken. Jeff Foster failed to awaken. So it's like what Frank was saying, that recognition, kind of living in this no man's land. You kind of can't go back to the world. You can't regress. You can't go back to the way it was. But at the same time, you can't seem to go forward either. You're kind of dangling in this place, kind of almost like half in the world but half not in the world, still, and there's still this hope, still this kind of subtle hope that at some point it's going to fall away, it's going to shift. And this was the place that I was in a few years ago, and of course, at the time I thought, well, this is hopeless, and I just thought, well, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. I can't make this shift happen. All these teachers they seem to have had this shift, and I couldn't seem to do it. I couldn't seem to get it. So I said, well, maybe it's just a question of luck. Maybe it's a question of grace. Maybe I should just sit here and wait for it to happen. Maybe I'll try doing nothing. I'll try sitting back doing nothing, because a lot of these teachers say do nothing, or there's nothing you can do, so I'll try doing nothing. Or maybe I'll just try not to try. Maybe I'll just forget about it. So I try forgetting about it, But all the time there was this kind of subtle hope. It was kind of like I call it the waiting game. It was like kind of, I was postponing living. It was like life was happening, but I wasn't going to live. I was kind of holding myself back from life because I thought there's something around the corner. There's this shift that's going to happen. There's something that's better than this. There's something that's better than this just around the corner. But the thing is, it never came, because of course there was still someone there waiting. There was still a separate me there waiting. So really, the whole thing ended in failure. Jeff failed, and so what Frank was saying is that there's a real intelligence to what he's saying. In a sense that seeing the futility of the seeking, it's like there's already an intelligence there. There's already something there that knows there's something beyond seeking. Even to recognize the futility of seeking, there already must be an intelligence there you could say that's awakening, an intelligence there that's kind of waking up, recognizing that the futility of looking into a future for salvation. But of course, the individual clings on to hope. It clings on to this vain hope, and in that it keeps itself going. As long as you have hope, you can carry on being a person, right? As long as there's hope. But of course, as long as there's hope, there's also the threat of hopelessness. So you live with the constant threat of hopelessness, and it's and I recognize this. I mean, I understand it, and all I can say, it was in the midst of that despair. It was in the midst of that failure. It was in the midst of Jeff's failure that this was seen. That it was seen that, because really all I was left with, you could say, after years and years, actually after a lifetime of seeking, because we're all seekers, even if we're not spiritual seekers. After a lifetime of seeking, what do I have to show for it? Nothing. All my seeking hadn't led anywhere, because I still found myself here. It's like, shit, I'm still here. And so it was in the midst of that absolute the failure of Jeff, that this was seen. And so people then say, well then it's okay for you, Jeff, because you searched. It's like, so Jeff, we have to seek before we fail. Well, the point is, like, we've all failed enough. We've all failed enough, and ultimately all seeking leads to failure, because the mind is looking for something it can't have. So, and of course, this message is massively threatening to the seeker. This is the last thing the spiritual seeker wants to hear. That the seeker who is so attached to their paths and their processes and their spiritual knowledge, they don't want to hear this. So I understand why people don't want to hear this. They're threatened by this message, or they think it's too simplistic, or they think it's, I don't know what they think. I can understand that, because right here, right now, this is the death of the seeker, the absolute death of the seeker. So, and of course, the other trap here is that, people then say, right, well, I need to fail. Jeff failed, and then he awakened. I didn't say that either. I never said that. What was seen is that there's no one here who could awaken, because there was never anyone here separate from everything. In other words, this had always been complete. I had always been complete. There was a wholeness here that really had nothing to do with Jeff and his seeking, or Jeff and his achievements or lack of achievements, and Jeff and his knowledge or his ignorance. What was seen in the midst of all that was life as it is, and that isn't a special state. That can be seen now. I'm not awakened. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as personal awakening. Someone who thinks they're awakened is just a person with a story about awakening. Someone who thinks they're enlightened is just someone with a belief that they're enlightened and they're separate from people who aren't enlightened. So there's a real intelligence, you could say, to that failure, to that sense of futility. But the point is, it doesn't end there. It doesn't end there. That futility, that sense of failure, is always pointing to something beyond itself. You know, and the whole thing, it's almost like you're stripped of everything. Everything you've tried has failed. You're stripped of everything. In a way, you're left with nothing. That's what the mind says anyway. The mind says, well, I tried everything. Now I'm left with nothing. Nothing worked. I'm left with nothing. And of course, that's the secret, is that nothing is everything. That there never was nothing. That it's almost like the mind, the person, the mind, the ego. The mind says, I'm everything. I do everything. I choose everything. I make everything happen. I'm a person. I'm thinking. I'm seeing. I'm hearing. I'm doing everything. I'm in control of my life. I'm a person in control of life. The person thinks I'm everything. So it's like the person projects. The mind projects. In the absence of me, in the absence of me and mine, me and my control, in the absence of me, there'll be nothing. That's the projection it makes. I'm everything. In the absence of me, there'll be nothing. Actually, that nothing is everything. There never was anyone here in control. There never was a seeker here. There never was anyone here doing the seeking. That was always the illusion. So actually, nothing is lost. All that could possibly be lost is the illusion of control. There was never anyone here in control. So that's the mind finds this message threatening, because it sees it as a threat to what it has. My control. Basically, it all comes down to control. The whole damn thing comes down to control, trying to control life, trying to get what I want. That's really what it's all about. That's really what it's all about. Getting what I want. The shocking thing about this is that this was never anything to do with you. This was never anything to do with you and what you wanted. It was never to do with you. And that's shocking to it's the last thing the spiritual seeker wants to hear, you know, that essentially life doesn't need you. You know, life doesn't need you. Doesn't need you and your seeking and your suffering and your misery. It doesn't need you. It doesn't reject you. It would never stop you from doing. It would never stop you from seeking. Doesn't need it. Perfectly complete without it. And that completion, the shocking thing is that completion was always here. We just couldn't see it. The completion was sitting on a chair breathing. Sitting on a chair breathing. The heart beating. Drinking, having a drink of water. You know, it was never about you. It was never about the seeker. It was always about life. It was always about this.